Good morning. Welcome to Saturday's Early Morning Intuitive Guidance. I'm Dr. Bonnie Nussbaum, here with some words of wisdom to start your day off well. And I'm hoping I have a good signal today because we have a really powerful reading that I hope gives us all pause and things to think about and ponder through and share with others and have some wonderful discussions around. So good morning to whomever just popped on. Nancy, good morning, good morning. Glad you are here. Welcome. So, a couple of updates. Got my computer back. I'm so happy. I ended up cleaning almost the whole house. That's what happens when you don't have screens. Tore apart the vacuum cleaner, cleaned out all the dog fuzz and stuff that was stopping it up, and works like a champ now. What else did I do? Dusted things. I cleaned off my entire desk and only put back what has earned a spot here. And so, yeah, I was a cleaning maniac yesterday, trying to bide time without my computer. So I took it in at 7:30 in the morning and got it back at about 5 o'clock at night. So it was an interesting day. Definitely felt the tug. So I'm reading a new book. Good morning, Jonelle. Welcome. Glad you are here. Good morning, Kennedy. Glad you are here. Welcome, welcome. This book was recommended to me by my friend Cynthia, who's a very deep person. She tries to pretend she isn't, but she's a very deep person. So when she mentioned this book and what she was gleaning from it, I thought, I need to read that as well. Good morning, Beth. Welcome. Glad you are here. So we'll be reading chapter 4 out of this book. And it might be a little bit longer than usual, kind of like when I read the Wild Kuan Yin cards. They're longer than usual, but I think there's very interesting stuff in here. And again, my hope is that it stirs conversation among you and some other people. Good morning, Abigail. I'm sorry. Yeah, several other people have said the notification thing was this little breath of fresh air, and now it's back to doing its same old thing. So, yeah, sorry about that. So, let us take some breaths and do a little tapping. Breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. One more nice deep breath. Hold at the top, in through the nose. And out. Right here, right now, fully present, ready to take in this message and see what it shakes loose for you. So the book is Saving God from Religion, a Minister's Search for Faith in a Skeptical Age. And the picture from the Sistine Chapel is Robin Meyers. This picture from the Sistine Chapel, first thing I learned when I went to the Sistine Chapel, it's a much smaller place than one would think it would be. You'd think it would be this big thing, but it's kind of modest. The space between these fingers is 6 feet. 6 feet. I mean, that's pretty interesting to think about. Good morning, Barb. Glad you are here. Welcome. But he had a dream, and that's kind of what set off some of this exploration for him, that the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel fell in, and that he was held responsible for it. Good morning, Maureen. Glad you're here. But I just thought that was such an interesting dream, and he weaves it into the book. So the chapter I'm going to read to you is chapter 4, Faith as Trust, Not Belief. Faith as trust, not belief. And the quote is from Mary Oliver. Truly, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood. I thought this chapter was very relevant for our times, and it helps us tap some history that can make a difference as we're moving forward. So, to be the pastor of the same church for 35 years is unheard of these days, especially if one is a progressive pastor and the congregation is in Oklahoma City. It makes my colleagues scratch their heads. Why don't you just move on, Robin? They ask with a hint of incredulous sorrow in their voices. Move on to where? I reply. To some perfect church without parishioners who drive you crazy? Tell me where that is. In the meantime, the most important time according to W.H. Auden, the meantime, What is the name of the book? It is Saving God from Religion, A Minister's Search for Faith in a Skeptical Age. And he's got another book out too, and let me go back to the beginning. And Saving Jesus from the Church is his first book, I believe. Let's see here. What better place to do progressive ministry than Oklahoma? It's exciting. Everyone around here says they love Jesus, but would have anyone who looked or acted like Jesus arrested immediately. What's more, for so many of my parishioners, there is a shared traumatic event that informs our common life. It occurred at 9:02 a.m. on the morning of April 19th, 1995, when Timothy McVeigh drove a truck converted into a bomb to the front door of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. He parked, lit the fuse, put in earplugs, got out, and walked away. The blast was so powerful that it knocked McVeigh down 2 blocks away and killed 168 people, including 19 children. It remains the worst act of domestic terrorism in American history. And I had little bitty kids at that point. Good morning, Diane. Glad you are here. And it decimated me. The images of those little kids. Yeah. So, all of us who lived through that horrible day became a family forged in grief, which is a much deeper bond than prosperity. Countless clergy, myself included, were given the job of meeting families in a local church to deliver the news that their loved ones were gone and that their bodies might never be found. Then we picked people up off the floor and wondered what kind of a world this is. Here we are again. On the other hand, the bombing forged a community determined to recover and reject hatred in all of its guises. It put the resilience of our city on display for the world to see, Minneapolis, and made this a place that I never wanted to leave. Recently, I asked my congregation to tell me their God stories. Not surprisingly, one young woman in her early 30s remembered that fateful April morning and wrote about how it changed her views on God forever. So this is the letter that this young woman wrote to her pastor, who asked his congregation to tell him their God stories. Growing up, my family did not consistently attend church, but in high school, we attended a Southern Baptist church in our town. I found myself saying all the things that I was supposed to say while not necessarily understanding the theology I was being taught. I was receiving positive reinforcement, however, and I liked that. This influence, combined with an offer for a softball scholarship, landed me at Southwest Baptist University my freshman year in college. It was at SBU that I took courses in Old Testament, New Testament, and spiritual formation. SBU is located in southwest Missouri, so as an Okie, I was actually considered a minority. One day in my spiritual foundation class, we were discussing Timothy McVeigh and his salvation. All of my classmates were saying that he was in heaven because he was saved. I asked about someone born into an indigenous tribe in Africa who never heard of Jesus. That person is in hell, they told me. I was 9 years old when the bomb went off. I knew people who died that day. And to put it mildly, I could not imagine Timothy McVeigh in heaven while all the unsaved were sentenced to eternal torment. Later, my professor assigned me a research project on another religion. I interviewed my friend who was Mormon. As it turned out, there was little desire to learn about Mormonism. In fact, the real purpose of the assignment was to equip us to convert Mormons and save their souls. I was done with religion. In 2007, I realized that I was gay, and so of course I became an atheist. In Oklahoma, one is either a Christian or one is a Democrat, but never both at the same time. So I became a Democrat. Everyone was appropriately shocked. I was just angry. Strangely enough, it was Jesus who brought me around. When I heard sermons about his teachings, about his radical hospitality, about the risks he took for justice and peace, I found myself changing from an angry atheist to a curious agnostic. Then I attended an LGBT event on a college campus and met a happy young woman with a WWJD bracelet and a subtle Bible verse tattooed on her wrist. I assumed she was straight. I was wrong. But she really, really, really loved Jesus. I had never met anyone like her before. As our relationship grew, deep theological conversations became the norm. They rarely ended in complete agreement, but at some point, my thinking about God began to shift. I started using God and the universe interchangeably. It helped remove the negative stigma that I had come to associate with God as a partisan patriarch. Energy, love, a deep spiritual mystery, they all seemed more believable to me than our orthodox God talk. I learned in graduate school that prayer improves health, but I believe now that it is more about the act of prayer than it is about answers to prayer. And interestingly, there was that one article I just read where they were talking about how we've actually removed the instructions on how to pray appropriately that Jesus demonstrated, which was go be by yourself, be in the stillness. You're not asking for anything. You're just being in the stillness. So I've been practicing that lately, and that's been quite interesting. So back to her letter to her pastor. It is about surrendering to limitations, about a desire to connect to something infinite and mysterious that makes spiritual sense to me now. As my relationship grew, I decided to propose to my future spouse. Now that same-sex marriage was legal in Oklahoma. Because I attend one of the only churches in Oklahoma that will officiate such weddings, I invited everyone from both families to attend, knowing that not everyone agreed with our decision. To say that it was a glorious evening would be an understatement. The power that is released in the beloved community when people from diverse backgrounds are brought together by love is astonishing. Minneapolis. Those who attended but did not believe in same-sex marriage were among the most enthusiastic in their support for us. They appeared almost startled by their own response, by how deeply they felt the presence of spirit. As if the integrity of marriage really is about covenant, not gender. That spirit, present when love is present and able to warm all hearts, is my best definition of God. Another important spiritual moment came for me when my grandfather died. It was after a long period of suffering and finally with hospice care. He waited for the arrival of his son and daughter-in-law from Texas. I saw divine design as the family left the room to share a meal, leaving my wife and me alone with a man I dearly loved. I had long since stopped believing in heaven and hell, at least not in the traditional sense. I believe that heaven and hell must be conditions on earth. But I do believe in souls and reincarnation. In physiology, the human body takes a glucose molecule and turns it into ATP, which is used as energy, and then expired in the form of carbon dioxide. Energy is never created or destroyed, but simply changes forms. I believe this about the human soul. I believe that our souls have all lived before, and that each time a piece of our soul comes to earth, there are certain lessons that we are to learn. I believe that our death comes at the time when our work on this earth is done. Some of my friends told me that such theology is New Age and lacks sufficient moral imperative and divine judgment. How will we know who is saved and who is lost? Who is to be punished and who deserves reward? Who has found favor with God and who is an infidel? My answer? We don't know. So just to be clear, my friends would say, your faith is based on not knowing? Exactly, I reply. If I was absolutely certain, I would need no faith at all. I just thought that was an interesting reading, especially given our current times. The uncertainty, the not knowing, that is the process. The stepping forward in faith when we can't see the whole staircase, that is the process. Take a breath. Let it go. Can you move yourself a little bit? Wiggle yourself into a space of, I can accept some unknown in my life. I can deal with some uncertainty. I'm working my way toward realizing uncertainty is the way. Uncertainty is the way. And that doubt is a part of it. He actually talks about that too, that it's not about people being certain. And I always laughed about that in the Catholic Church, where when someone was up for sainthood, they made a huge issue out of whether or not they had ever doubted, because really, if you're about to be a saint, you ought not have had any doubt. Jesus had doubt. Come on. Doubt is a part of the process. But then stepping into the uncertainty, moving forward anyway, doing what feels divinely right, what you're being guided to do, even though you don't know for sure. Even though you don't know for sure. Your faith is tired. Understood. Understood. Let me see if I can find that little part that he had right after that, because that was helpful as well. Preachers talk about faith as if it's a kind of quantifiable certainty about theological propositions. One exhibits a strong faith by being certain about religious doctrines, by not doubting them, or at least by not admitting that one doubts them. Those who lack faith, O ye of little faith, appear to have a deficiency, as if suffering from some kind of spiritual anemia. So when life's tragedies strike, those who lack a certain doctrinal blood count may faint for lack of unquestioned belief. Yet if God is responsible for everything that happens, then God must be the author of every tragic moment as well as every joyful one. I just think that this is, to me, very refreshing theology. All those years of going through Catholicism, I never felt a sense of being held in the uncertainty. It was being told that we weren't smart enough or learned enough to interpret things like the Bible verses ourselves. We needed to rely on the priest to do that for us. So having people who are wrestling with it, yeah, exactly. Having people who are wrestling with it and putting it out there. And I loved that part where she talked about, in her letter to her pastor, having theological discussions with her soon-to-be spouse. That's the kind of stuff that I think people are hungering for. Let's have the conversations about it. And let's not be wagging our finger at each other and going, oh, ye of little faith. That's the portal for doing the deep dive into, what do we believe? And when we aren't strong enough to hold a belief yet, how do we bring faith into the picture? How do we bring enough faith into the picture that we take the next step on the staircase? So hopefully this stirred some interesting thoughts in your mind. Hopefully some of you get the book. I think it's an awesome read that's affording a lot of internal processing. So have a fabulous Saturday. I will see you again tomorrow. Remember, you're capable of far more than you think you are. Bye-bye.